A quote by John F. Kennedy reads, "Children are the world's most valuable resource and its best hope for the future." This is certainly the case for Malala Yousafzai, the 17-year-old Nobel Peace Prize recipient who fought to change the world for the better. Malala was born in Mingora, Pakistan, and when she spoke out against the Taliban, they tried to assassinate her in 2012. Fortunately, she survived. She's an advocate for girls' rights, children's rights, and the right to education. At 17 years old, she gave her Nobel lecture as a recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize. Malala gave her Nobel lecture on December 10, 2014, in Oslo City Hall in Norway. In the audience at her Nobel lecture, it included members of the Nobel Committee as well as members of Norwegian royalty. At this point in history, the Taliban ruled Malala's home region. This area was plagued by war and terrorism, and girls were not allowed to go to school. Furthermore, the timing of Malala's speech was critical. In the next year, the United Nations would meet to set the Sustainable Development Goals. Malala saw that this was an opportunity to persuade powerful leaders to help make real change in her home country and around the world. Malala's purpose in her speech is to advocate for girls' rights, children's rights, and educational rights. She calls for peace, and she strives to persuade the world's leaders to bring about lasting change in developing countries. Here is an excerpt from her Nobel lecture.
Seize this opportunity to guarantee a free, quality, primary and secondary education for every child. Some will say this is impractical, or too expensive, or too hard, or maybe even impossible. But it is time the world thinks bigger. Dear sisters and brothers, the so-called world of adults may understand it, but we children don't. Why is it that countries which we call strong are so powerful in creating wars, but are so weak in bringing peace? Why is it? Why is it that giving guns is so easy, but giving books is so hard? Why is it? Why is it that making tanks is so easy, but building schools is so hard?
Malala uses ethos, logos, and pathos in her speech. She establishes credibility through her perspective as a witness and a victim to what life was like in Pakistan. She shares her personal story and what it was like growing up and not being allowed to go to school. She is also respected as a laureate of the Nobel Prize. She was receiving this prize and giving this speech, and everyone there knew that. Malala presents a logical argument as well. Throughout her speech, she is reasoning with her argument through these rhetorical questions that have specific examples. She's asking them, why is it that we can do this, but we can't do that? In this excerpt, she reasoned with rhetorical questions, but outside of this, she also references the 2015 United Nations meeting and the Sustainable Development Goals as specific evidence that her message is time sensitive. Finally, she appeals to listeners' emotions. She addresses her audience as sisters and brothers. Outside of this excerpt, she shares her personal story of overcoming tragedy and hardship It's a truly inspiring story. Malala's use of rhetorical devices strengthens her speech, her persuasive speech. First, she uses polysyndeton. This is the use of the contraction or between each of her examples here. Some will say this is impractical, or too expensive, or too hard, or maybe even impossible. She also incorporates anaphora by starting each of her examples with the phrase, "Why is it?" The repetition of this phrase is what makes it anaphora. She also incorporates the element of climax as her description progresses from impractical to too hard to impossible. Malala's speech was well received with applause and cheering. She opened the eyes of her audience to the horrors faced by children in Pakistan and around the world, and she made an effective statement about her message. Her message still applies today. It will endure because, as the youngest recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize, she gave a memorable and inspiring speech. Malala's Nobel lecture is an excellent example of a persuasive speech. She incorporated ethos, pathos, and logos, as well as rhetorical devices to strengthen her message. As one of the world's greatest speakers, Malala Yousafzai left a lasting impression on everyone. Thank you.